Thank you, Fernando. It's a great honor to be here. I have to also confess I am humbled to sit here, and the humbled part wants for me to flee immediately after what we just heard, but the part of me that also loves what we just heard gives me the courage to sit here and speak after our predecessors. Maybe I can say something that will put the notion of generation into a slightly different framework, the framework of chorology. And I will also try to suggest, we don't have much time to do more, to suggest the implications of chorology for law. That's my objective. The occasion of our gathering makes me mindful of beginnings, and I want to honor that memory. And specifically, I want to recall Plato's Chora. And as I said, to speak to you about chorology, which is to say about the beginning of the beginning. The felt need to return to the beginning is, I think, suggestive of a long brewing crisis, a sign of exhaustion, and a need for renewal. As T.S. Eliot famously wrote in 4 quartets, "In my beginning is my end, and in my end is my beginning." These days, the struggle for renewal is once again playing out on the surface of images. We're living in a visual age. It is an age of omnipresent electronic screens with an incessant flow of digital representations. And this state of affairs, these conditions force upon us the age-old question, what is an image? It's a question with deep theological, political, and jurisprudential ramifications. As Marie-José Manzane has written, "Whoever monopolizes visibility conquers thought itself and determines the shape of liberty." So it is no small thing to grasp the organizing principle of a particular visual economy. That principle tells us a good deal about what authorizes the image, and I will argue by extension, what authorizes or legitimates the law. As you know, terrible wars have been fought over the organizing principle of visiocracy. The history of iconoclasm makes that all too plain. Does a Byzantine icon, or for that matter, we might say iconic Buddhas such as those carved into the Bamiyan cliffs of Afghanistan, do these images mock or revere the uncontainability of their source? We may pose a similar question to the digital image. Does it evoke or annihilate reality? Does it disseminate truth or make truth impossible, perhaps by making it irrelevant? There is a deep metaphysical struggle taking place on the surface of the image. It's a struggle over whether, in fact, only surfaces remain, those countless digital surfaces that we all surf online. Are digital images simulations without originals? Are they capable of presence? Is there presence without essence? These are the kinds of questions that digital or virtual reality compel. And so we ask, what does it mean to forget the original? Which is to say, to forget chorology, the way essence comes into existence in the beginning of the beginning. As you know, chorology derives from the ancient Greek word chora, which is the word for opening or making room for. It is the third genus, mediating being and becoming. There from the beginning, according to Plato and the Timaeus, there from the beginning, eternal, as the staging area for creation. So what is this chora, this mysterious third genus, this strange field, or as Plato calls it, this receptacle, this formless matrix of relationality that is nothing in itself, a bottomless abyss that lets all things be as they are? We can try to imagine this. Here's a graph of what we're talking about, mediation. It reminds me of a black hole in space, which is what this image shows. Or here's something I created as an imaginary simulation. Let's see, can I get this to go? Yeah. This is a kind of contraction within essence, a nothing from which essence is impressed upon existence. In imagination of the process. In his most recent book, Giorgio Agamben, have you seen The Unrealizable? He says that our forgetfulness of the original, I think we can also say our forgetfulness of essence, maybe even of the sacred, leads to the loss of truth. And Agamben also says, the loss of politics. So this is catastrophic. Yet, this may well prove to be one of the legacies of modernity. The contemporary rise of digital culture, yes, and of artificial intelligence, is an outgrowth of technology conceived and practiced as unrestrained power over desacralized nature. And we are now seeing that the global dissemination of social media and artificial intelligence threaten to cripple our humanity, to cripple our capacity for autonomous thinking and for relationality itself, which is, of course, the essence of community. In law and politics, this loss manifests as a crisis of law's legitimacy. This is a condition that Walter Benjamin famously described as a perpetual state of emergency, what Habermas called the perpetual legitimation crisis. Like the ceaseless flow of digital forms on electronic screens, legal rules in many states today maintain formal validity, but they have ceased to signify. They covet the power that comes with formal validity, but they lack the legitimating meaning, which is the basis for authority itself. This is what it's like to experience law as what I call a digital Baroque spectacle, a dazzling stream of incoherent executive commands. I won't speak about local politics right now, but I have it in mind. Legitimate laws are respected and followed not out of fear, but out of acceptance, because it is right or just to do so. And to ask what legitimates the authority of a legal command is not very different from asking what legitimates the authority of an image. And certainly in our visual age, the two have converged. So we ask, is its claim to power legitimate or idolatrous? Which is to say, does it carry the authenticity of a legitimating source? In the beginning, law arises from an authority outside itself. We understand the nature of that authority by the way we name it, the way we convert raw constituent power into constituted authority. That's what constitutions do. Legitimation fails when we cannot properly remember or believe in the names we have for constituted authority. So people ask, what is freedom? What is liberal democracy? So some political leaders only add to the confusion. Freedom, they say, is efficiency. Freedom is the removal of waste. Equality, they say, is for those who deserve it, those who truly belong, not for others, the strangers among us. And amidst all this deliberate confusion, one may well wonder, what could freedom among equals mean in the absence of something essential, something sacred? What could it mean to speak of universal human rights or of the very right to claim rights without recognizing the infinite worth of each other? These are the conditions under which we are called to return to the beginning of the beginning. This is the chorological turn, let's call it. A search to renew our knowledge of essence. How else are we to counter the catastrophic logic of modernity? A logic that leads to the forgetfulness of originals. And at least partial responsibility for this forgetfulness can be traced to Descartes, the affirmation of reality as pure material extension. In such a world, we arrive at knowledge only as subjects standing before objects. Instead of emanating from essence, signs become nominal ciphers, artificial integers that humans freely posit. This is the legacy of Thomas Hobbes. This state of affairs culminates in the ascendancy of a virtual counter-reality, and what I'm starting to think of as an inhuman counter-life, the life online. The life that awaits us when we live long enough in a simulated digital reality, delegating thinking and judging to artificial intelligence machines. I've seen stuff like this online. Jesus AI. It's a website. What remains then in such a counterlife are contingent nominal forms, forms utterly vacated of essence, forms, including forms of law that command but do not signify. That's when the rule of law and the will to power are as one. To recall the essential, as Agamben invites us to do, is to inquire into the unrealizable. How does unrealizable essence come into existence? How is it known? How do we understand today the mediation and essence and existence at the beginning of the beginning before creation? So in what follows, I want to highlight what I believe is a key feature of that mediation, and this is the heart of chorology, as I understand it. In the beginning of the beginning, there is sacrifice. That's how mediation occurs. And there are many different cultural accounts of this sacrifice. For example, in the 16th century, the Lurianic Kabbalists used the word Tzimtzum to describe the originary fracture of God's essence, his contraction, in order to make room for creation, so that creation could be. And in this account, God contracted from his essence to create an opening, a void for creation, room for creation to be in. Many centuries earlier in the Timaeus, Plato used the word chor. And I think he used that word to describe a similar opening, an opening that creates room, space for creation. This chora is neither essence nor existence. It's neither intelligible nor sensible, yet through its power of mediation, chora somehow partakes of both. It makes the intelligible sensible and the sensible vivid with generative power. It is in the nature of chora to show us how essence enters into existence. In late modernity, the question arose again. If creation emanates from the empty abyss, perhaps it's the nothing out of which God created when he contracted from his essence. Perhaps it's that nothing that pervades creation. This was the theory of Gershom Scholem. He called it mystical nominalism. It's a kind of nihilism, the nothingness that pervades creation. It's what the Gnostics call kenoma, creation evacuated of essence. It's Kafka's world, a world in which nothing is left of God but the void. It's as if we were lost in an abyss between two mirrors facing each other, living amidst images of images, a reality that always withdraws, like Jacques Derrida's Difference, or like Walter Benjamin's Angel of History, his face turned toward the past, where all he sees is one single catastrophe that keeps piling ruin upon ruin, and the debris that's piled before him, that grows skyward, is but the storm blowing from paradise that we call progress. But Scholem's modern nihilistic take on chora is not the mainstream view. It's not my view. According to many other theorists, I think a more mainstream view regarding God's contraction, the Tzimtzum that I mentioned, is not the death of God, but rather an act of self-sacrifice for love of creation. In creating the nothing, the opening for creation, God creates the freedom of possibility. Professor Sequeri described it. Loving, he said, is the elementary experience of freedom. In freedom, we partake of God's self-sacrificial love. a love through which creation may be redeemed. Kenotic love may thus be viewed as the trace of God's essence that persists in creation, an essence by which things are as they are. Chora, in this view, is the openness through which we discern that trace, that essence. As Heidegger wrote, chora is what is taken up and occupied by what stands there. The place belongs to the thing itself. In a similar sense, Plato used the term womb. Chora as womb functions as a container of the uncontainable. We recognize that as some here have written and know more than I about. This is the Chora Church in Istanbul, which I had the good fortune to visit. And this is how Byzantine artists in the 14th century depicted Christ in the womb of Mary, Chora Akoratan, the one who opens the heart of the divine. The womb as container of the uncontainable. The chora within, which mimics the chora without, an opening that contains the uncontainable for love of creation. For love of creation, love sacrifices its perfection. God evacuates his essence, creating a void for creation to fill. Christ sacrifices his mortal body for creation to be redeemed. In essence, sacrifice is the paradigm. It coincides with the origin of generative eros, the creation of emptiness, the void of God's self-contraction. Scientists might describe that as entropy, the universal force to fill in. Motion begins as longing, forms reaching out, effectively seeking to bond with other forms in an endless process of complexification. Relationship upon relationship, bond upon bond. This is the binding power of desire. And we see it enacted. Something I saw 2 days ago, again, at the Uffizi. Botticelli's beautiful blueprint, the Primavera, which describes this very mediation process. These forms of eros. I don't know if you can see it clearly enough. The carnal, erotic form on one side, the spiritual on the other. The three graces embodying culture and art, law, and Aphrodite turning away from the carnal and gesturing towards the spiritual, with Mercury gesturing above, as if to unify earth and sky, mortal and immortal. Maybe even, I don't know if you see this, I've begun to see this shape here as a mandola, the term mandola. We're used to we're used to seeing the halo around the head of certain sacred figures, but the mandola surrounds the entire body, right? Mandola. Thank you. Here's another one. It's a liminal space. It's where opposites meet, heaven and earth, essence and existence, or carnal desire and spiritual yearning. The matrix, which is chora, that's what I'm proposing. And that's what I think Botticelli is gesturing toward in this blueprint. So this movement, which Nicoletta Issa has written brilliantly about, suggesting the evocative aspect of chora, which we find in the etymology, as you say, of choreo, the chorus, we might say, the movement of the three graces in Botticelli's Primavera. And in this dispensation, the birth of longing, or eros, is the birth of generativity, of an affective urge toward relationship, bonding one thing with another in an incessant, complexifying dance of energy and matter. And according to this blueprint, spirit. In Plato's Symposium, Socrates' teacher, Diotima, describes the same drama that Botticelli is depicting here, the generativity of eros. Diotima says eros builds from the physical domain, the right side of the painting, to the cultural, the three graces, including politics and law, ultimately to the spiritual plane, seeking the just and the good, which is Hermes on the left. Chorology, like Botticelli's Primavera, offers a blueprint. It helps us envision and speak about the birth of existing things. Through chorology, the intelligible becomes sensible, and in this way it provides an organizing principle of visiocracy, the visual economy of our time. And this vouchsafes Agamben's observation that by studying chorology, we may come to know true politics, which is to say we may be guided out of the cave of illusions, of shadows, of simulations without originals, to behold the sun, the essential source of the good. And the paradigm of sacrifice presents this kind of blueprint. What does it mean to imitate God's self-sacrifice for love of creation? Well, we find in the answering letter to Philippians, Paul says, "Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ, who emptied himself," according to one translation, who sacrificed himself, who emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. Let the chora within emulate the chora without. If the mediation of essence and existence gives us chorological metaphysics, the emulation of kenotic love gives us a chorological anthropology and a chorological phenomenology. The anthropology says humans are born to wonder. The phenomenology describes how we capacitate wonder through attunement, autoaffection. I use the word attunement. I think they're analogous. It's the affective capacity of being with others in the world, others sentient and non-sentient. Wonder is the natural state of mind in which we behold creation. In wonder, that there is something rather than nothing. Attunement, autoaffection, attunement is the way we cultivate wonder in order to amplify our affective bond with others. Attunement, I think this is very close to what we heard Professor Segueri say. Attunement, or maybe mindfulness, arises from self-demotion, self-contraction, diminution of ego, creating a clearing within us, chora, a clearing within us, a chora, sacrifice of ego to create an opening for others to be in, letting others be. That's the kernel of relationship. And this internal chora correlates with the condition of auto-affection that Kant talked about in his later writings. He called it intuition without an object, like a field of pure receptivity. This is before the phenomenologists, but it's close. Wallace Stevens, a great American poet who I love, I happen to have a chair in his name because he graduated from my law school. Wallace Stevens described this as emptiness, deep in the eye, behind all actual seeing, this openness. Mind empties out in order to let the world and others in. This auto-affective field of, we call it a pure medial state, the pure medial state of Chora. This is a model, I think, for kenotic love. What Professor Sequeri describes as freedom as a promise of attachment. I like that very much. Here we encounter as well the legitimating source of law's authority. Pro-affection is the key to justice. Justice infused with love, a love that lets beings be in their essence. This is the essence of relationship. And the thought also occurred to me that this mediation, beyond being, according to Plato, Chora is beyond being, outside of space and time. Perhaps this is the good, because, I don't know if you buy this idea, because to the extent that Chora's function is to mediate essence and existence, if we say it impresses essence upon existence, is that not the function of the good? He saw what he made and it was good. Is that not the function of the good, to impress essence upon being, upon existence? Pure receptivity, born of self-sacrifice, generates a pro-affective field of attunement, binding us to others who appear in their essence within the field of pro-affectivity, attunement, the emptied space of our own self-demotion. To know another in his or her essence is also to experience a profound excess, an abundance. What is that abundance? Infinite worth. The echoes of Levinas here. Infinite worth. And on the heels of this knowledge comes obligation, the felt need to safeguard what is of immeasurable value. In other words, attunement effectively binds us to a community of others from obligation, experience the essence of the other as excess, infinite worth. And that primal bond, chorologically derived, marks the origin, I'm arguing, of true politics. The infinite worth of the individual is the true source of universal rights. It's the obligation we feel in this encounter with the essence of the other, that excess, that infinite worth. It's in that field that we experience obligation, which is the source of universal rights. It authorizes the very right to claim rights. This is not simply a matter of declaring rights by virtue of positing a rule or a charter. I'm not arguing against that, which is the way we have it today. But underlying it, obligation is primary. That's how we safeguard what is of infinite worth. How else would we respond to infinite worth but to want to safeguard it? And the right to claim rights serves that function. The essence we love legitimates the authority of law. And this genealogy irrevocably ties law to chorology, for without the capacity to recall chorology's medial function, this mediation I'm describing, how do we understand how essence enters into existence? How do we overcome forgetfulness? How do we find our way out of the cave, as Paolo likes to say, away from the shadows, toward the sun? Chorology teaches that the core within us is an opening that discloses freedom as pure possibility. In this sense, core as attunement, as auto-effective receptivity, as prayer, serves as the staging area for being with others. It opens a way for others nearby, our neighbors, to be in their essence. This is the gift of kenotic love, a love that attests to the infinite worth of every other. This origin points to the essence of a just community, a community that reflects, I think, something that Marcia Powley writes about under the rubric of covenantal justice. Why covenantal justice? Because if freedom's promise in relation to others follows the paradigm of God's or the Son's sacrifice out of love for creation, then taking that promise to heart may properly bear the name of covenantal justice. Covenantal justice promises to safeguard every other in their infinite worth. This is what names the legitimating authority of law, the basis for law's claim to power, why we accept it, or ought to accept it. And in so doing, it identifies law's proper function. What is that function? To preserve and advance the ideal of freedom among equals. So this is my argument for how chorology leads to a true politics. And I'll finish up with just a few suggestions. Do I have another couple of minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. I'll do this in 3 minutes. I want to suggest that this model of true politics has other characteristics which we need to bear in mind, but I'm not going to, this is for another time, but I want you just to hear what I think this model encompasses. A model of true politics based on chorology has certain conditions, important virtues, let's say, which I'll mention. They include uncertainty and non-totalization. Just quickly. Uncertainty because no one can claim access to truth in its totality. Essence, the source of existence that Chora mediates, remains, as Agamben puts it, unrealizable. And if the condition of Chora's visibility is light, then we also may say that, like light, Chora's mediation of energy and matter is ineluctably uncertain. That's what quantum physics teaches us, right? Every act of measurement alters what is measured, so that the actual nature of light at any given moment, particle or wave, remains unknowable. Naming the unrealizable is like measuring light. It remains uncertain and cannot be totalized. Inescapable uncertainty has legal consequences, constituting power in a legitimate form while protecting against totalization requires specific institutional strategies of division and decentralization. And here I could say more, and I won't, about separation of powers and checks and balances as tools of non-totalization. I'm speaking from the heart, from a place in the world today where these institutions are being lost. But freedom among equals presupposes law's primary function as a safeguard against totalized power. And uncertainty and non-totalization also have the virtue of elevating tolerance. Tolerance as a high political virtue. So we have a natural alliance among uncertainty, tolerance, and a cultural ethos of collective innovation and experimentation. Why innovation? Because everyone gains from individual and collective progress in the growth of knowledge. And so long as this freedom is exercised consistent with the aspiration of freedom among equals, knowledge progresses. This is not liberal democracy as a vacuous, amoral theory. This is profoundly moral. It's the true politics, I suggest, that chorology generates. I began with Eliot, and I'll just end with this quote again from Four Quartets from Little Gidding. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Thank you.